So today we're going to talk about the future of client engagement. So working as a lawyer in personal injury and using technology to power your practice and bring efficiency so that your clients can benefit. And, as providers, you should understand the technology that's coming in from the law firms, but also technology is coming into the rehab field as well. So many of these innovations that I'll talk about impact all professionals. So yes, you can imagine a day where, especially with Elon Musk now in the White House with Trump, a day where robots are going to be flourishing amongst us and helping people, hopefully in a positive way, both navigate the courtroom and navigate our lives. And so that's why I actually had Copilot create this image for me. So it isn't a copyrighted image, it's an image I created through using Copilot, a very cool tool where I just told it to come up with an image of a futuristic looking courtroom. Some of the things we're going to talk about today, just to give you a bit of a refresher on artificial intelligence, where we're at with that, how it's impacting legal research, case analysis, and how law firms can really streamline their workflow. What kind of programs are we using with generative AI? In our office specifically, what is our technology, our tech stack? Some of the workflows we've been able to create with our CRM, our customer retention manager, which is FileMine. And then some of the challenges that courts have grappled with, some of the things that we have to think about as we go through and bring AI into our legal practices, and then some future trends as to what you can expect in the next little while. So let's get started. AI is absolutely necessary in order for us to advance further and also for curbing disease, famine, and many other major world problems. Some people call this artificial intelligence, but this reality is a technology that will enhance us. So instead of artificial intelligence, I think we'll augment our intelligence. And you can think of the cell phone and how that's progressed. It's almost inseparable from our existence. We don't go anywhere without our extra little intelligent assistant with us, our brain extender, as Ray Kurzweil calls it. And if you think about how that's going to evolve into a wearable, into a way that we're going to be able to access information even quicker and faster than we do instead of typing it into our phones. That's what you can see evolving over time. How did we get there? Well, we've had artificial intelligence. If you think of things that computers do to make our lives easier or to think outside of our brains, we had a calculator that was created by Blaise Pascal in 1642. The idea of a programmable machine was created by Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace back in 1837, and it was put to work by Alan Turing when he created this amazing machine that basically was a wall of vacuum tubes to try to figure out the code and break the code successfully of during the World War II, so that they could turn the tide of the war. And that was the first time that we really got into the idea of computers entering our lives. And Alan Turing created what was called the Turing test, which was the idea that if you can put a simulation together where you put individuals in two separate rooms and you prompt them with answers from different machines, one from a human, one from a machine, and you can't tell the difference, that would be the Turing test or the artificial intelligence test. And we've certainly got to that point today, but that's only recent, right? It's only since 2022 that we have really seen what computers can do with artificial intelligence. Until that time, it was really just theorized. Artificial intelligence was coined by John McCarthy in 1955 at a conference in California. And you can see over time how innovations have, we've had computers win at Jeopardy. We've had computers win at chess and the game Go. And so we've moved along the timeline. And if you look at it on a exponential level, I have a slide in a minute to show you that. So what is AI? Well, John McCarthy at Stanford coined it as the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. Intelligence is the ability to achieve goals. It doesn't have to be biological. And so a lot of terms come in that we really need to learn about if we're going to be familiar with these machines. Now, why does it matter? Well, as lawyers, if we're going to use generative AI systems to bring our evidence into court, we're going to need to know how to explain what we're using. And if the experts are using it, we're going to need to explain how the experts are using all of these terms. So deep learning is the idea that a computer has a huge data set and will learn from it. The neural network is this idea that we have millions of computers working together to create a supercomputer that works similar to how our neurons work in our brain. And the data set can be a very closed section of information. So think about the court cases. Well, that can make up a data set. And CanLII, which is all our Canadian cases that have been put together by CanLII, they're actually suing some of these providers that have scraped their data set and put it into their programs. That data set is valuable. And so CanLII wants to be paid back for uncopyrighted use of their material. Generative AI is the idea of generating information through these data sets. The algorithm is the idea of teaching the computer what to do. What is the pattern of behavior? How does it predict things? And we can go through the other ideas of chatbots, cognitive computing, large language models. That's, again, how they train these computers. Bias comes into the discussion. Natural language processing, annotation, backward chaining. These are things that we all need to get familiar with. So the exponential curve of how we've got here, we looked at it on the AI timeline, but if we look at it on the progress of just the processor, so the equation is that, and Ray Kurzweil calls this an exponential curve, where all progress doubles every 2 years. So you can go back to the 1900s, and we really didn't see a lot of progress. I mean, things happened. We had computers. We were always promised to do so much more, and we can remember when the PC and the came out in the 80s, and we were starting to use them, for those that are old enough to remember that. And then we progressed to a cell phone, et cetera. And by the 2020s, we have got computers surpassing and approaching our level of intelligence. So if you look at that mouse on the right, its brain power is about 10 to the 12th power. That's how fast it processes information. And our brain power is about 10 to the 16th power. Where we're heading right now, we're probably already getting beyond that processing power speed. But by 2045, the prediction is that we will be at a much faster processing power than what would be equivalent to all of our human brains together. So imagine pulling out your phone or being able to call it up in some kind of wearable that I want to know the answer to a question. You would have all the information of humankind. And that's not just the internet. It'll be beyond that power. To come up with that, not just the answer, but the processing speed of the answer will be faster. So think of reading a book or listening to a book on Audible, and you ever put it to ×2 and you see how fast it's read to you, you will be able to process information at that kind of speed in those years to come. So think about everything doubling, and we are at a bit of a tipping point at this point in our evolution. Because if things are doubling every 2 years, could you imagine all these innovations and where we're at and how fast things will change at this point in time? So if you asked a mouse, and yeah, there it shows you its processing power. If you gave the mouse the ability to think like a human being, and you gave it to them for a year, and then you said to the mouse, you want to go back to being a mouse? We're going to reverse the process. The mouse wouldn't be too excited about that answer because, it's now got all this super intelligence in its mind. That's the opportunity we're going to face in a few years, probably about 10 or 15 years from now. We will have the ability to process our brains in a manner that computes with all humankind. We call that super intelligence. And while that's scary because it's a change and it's something we'd have to get used to, I am pretty convinced that you wouldn't want to go back to just having your processing power once you've learned what it's like to process at that higher speed. So we go into the different variables of what does it mean to have super intelligence. So narrow intelligence is the idea to do a specific task. Think of driving. That's one specific task, or giving financial advice, or a medical diagnosis. Artificial general intelligence is the idea of multitasking. Okay, so now you're basically, the computer can do what a human does. So we've seen how generative AI performs well on the LSAT. It performs well on the MCAT. It can get a university degree. It can do a lot of things. And it probably doesn't faze us at this point because we can go on the computer and look up anything, and a lot of information, obviously, that we don't know, it can figure out. So the idea of it doing it on its own is just a matter of the algorithms being set up to train it to do that. The next step will be artificial superintelligence. This is the idea that the computer will outperform us. And we're a few years away from that. And the issue is going to be, and it's a pretty daunting issue, as to if you have these computers that are well beyond our capabilities of competing with, how do we set them on a course that's going to make sure our existence is safe? It's an existential threat if you have a dictatorship government that wants to use AI to take over the world, or make sure that its population is dominant. So these are the kinds of things that Noah Harari talks about in his book that just came out called Nexus. And there's a lot of us who have to think about what correcting mechanisms do we have to put in place to make sure that this doesn't run amok and destroy our civilization. And we are on a course where, if we're not careful, we could be destined for the end of time. It's almost like having a nuclear bomb go off. So superintelligence has that type of threat. Now we bring it back to our legal world and how AI is affecting us. And you can tell that white collar jobs, computer jobs, professional jobs are the most exposed right now to AI. And there was a study done by Princeton and UPenn that 80% of workers will have 10% of their tasks affected by the latest AI software. It obviously evolved over time. When I came into practice in the 90s, we had the fax machine, and then we had the internet and email, and all of these things brought about efficiencies. We now all have paperless offices, and there's a lot of clerical jobs that have disappeared, and they've reinvented themselves in other places. So people get nervous every time there's a shift, but most of the time, people wouldn't have known to go to university for things like social media, but yet that's a whole booming industry. That didn't exist in the 90s, but now it's a whole degree. And similarly, the idea of training algorithms and data mining and the math that's required to make these predictions, to be a data scientist. These are careers that are emerging. So generative AI is really just from machine deep learning and making predictions from large data sets, because this machine will be looking, if you look at Google's Gemini or ChatGPT from OpenAI, all they've done is they've taken everything that's on the internet, every book that's ever been written, so they can predict, going through it in a very high processing speed with millions of computers powering together. They can predict what the next word's going to be because they've understood the language. So it's basically a prediction model. And it can happen in a sentence where you're typing. It can happen in a paragraph. If you ask it to type a speech, it can create a prediction on what that speech would look like. It can change the tone of the speech. And it affects almost everything we do from a computing point of view. So whether that's designing something like that image I showed you at the outset, which I had Copilot draft for me, music composition, content creation. So just coming up, you have a difficulty starting a paper, you can have it give you a few ideas to brainstorm, create a virtual world. Again, that's through its imagery. All these different areas that you can see, and it even involves healthcare, financial forecasting. So some would say your job gets a lot easier because now you've got all this time saved and your speeches can be drafted, but we're still responsible for what we're doing. And as lawyers, we're still responsible when we put our name on the document, that's our license going forward. So no different than having a student or a younger lawyer draft something for you. You still have to read it, review it, and make sure that it represents your client's best interest in your opinion. Well, there's lots of different software out there that's on this race for the AI leadership. And let's look at how it's impacted in the legal world. So we have lots of different platforms. Thomson Reuters, Lexis, Harvey, all have their versions of how they can make your office work more efficiently, bring in legal research and writing, both for factums. We can use it for contract writing. You can put chatbots on your website. We use Smith AI, contract reviewers, legal research, and on it goes. There's, if not, there's probably hundreds of different software companies. And if you are a software company and you're not involved in AI, you're probably not going to be involved very long in the future, because AI is in everything we do at this point. This is the leading programs that we're using. So we have Alexi for legal research. We have FileVine for all our client projects that we're working on and drafting. We use Lexis plus AI for both legal research and drafting. We use Domo, which is a very innovative technology used for, basically an analytics. So understanding the analytics of the practice, which lawyers got which files, which types of files, their, all their data and analytics around the work that they do, around the work that the firm does, the demographics of our clients, citizenship, the type of clients that we take on. Obviously, we're using the Zoom platform for all our telecommunications, so not just for video meetings, but for telephone. It's our voice over internet phone. That way we can work remotely. We use it for interoffice texting. And then we use Copilot. All the Microsoft Suite products have Copilot built in to help with predicting and helping with this presentation, putting it together. In our office, AI is really used in three big areas: with research, medical summaries, and with drafting. We look at it in the legal research area. They've made it so easy. We went through law school. We had to go to libraries and pull out all sorts of books and, annotations and microfiche. And now you basically don't have to leave your computer. You do a plain English search. These pieces of software will draft a memo. So you don't need to assign it to anyone. You can essentially have it done on the spot. And then you can even form part of your legal text in terms of your factum writing, your arguments, analysis of that research. So here's an example of some analysis at work on the Lexis Plus platform. So you would drag what you want it to analyze. This could be just a medical record that you want it to help summarize. Or you put in a case and you want to know, how to draft it. You give it the jurisdiction. It applies it to all these different sections. And it can tell you if you're looking up a case, how it was treated in other courts. And it'll give you recommendations. What cases to include in your brief, where to cite it. This is an example. This is the same thing. So Alexi works a little differently. This is a plain English search. You just go through, you go onto the platform, you say, I want a legal memo on a certain subject. And so I write in, I want to re-examine the parties. It's a re-examination under Rule 3411. What are the limits? And pops a memo up quickly. Leading cases, gives you your answer. That research is done instantly, which may have taken, a few days to do that research previously. So the efficiency is brought into the practice. The client has the answer immediately. If your client was asking you a novel issue about the law that, wasn't in your practice area, you could get that research done very quickly. Or you're doing research for a factum. The case law of a specific judge. You could look up, you're appearing in front of a judge, you want to know how that judge has been treated previously, what type of leanings does it have. You can look up the judge. They'll give you all the analytics and stats for that judge, which cases they cite, and then you're ready. Here is an example of how drafting can be done. Draft a client email, and under what circumstances a non-compete agreement will be enforceable against an employee in Ontario. And boom, there's your memo. Moments later, you have it. It analyzes for you. Now you're going to upload and ask a number of questions about a leading case. Drag and drop. Ask your question about that case. What are the main arguments? And there it is. You can copy that to your own memo. And then AI also enters into our CRM program. So FileVine has AI. They have AI fields which show up in different parts of the program that allow you to just push a button to summarize a medical document, ask it questions about the project based on what the data is in the file. There's a program called Demands AI where it'll draft for you a settlement proposal or a mediation memo. Sidebar AI is a little pop-up chatbot that helps you, answer questions about the project. You want to know on this email string, what was just summarize the last 30 days of activity. And they have other areas which we haven't explored yet, but they have other areas that affect other practices. What will the work like be for assistants? Well, if we look at all the things that the individual will be able to do on their own, we're going to be getting our legal staff into more detailed work. So moving away from the letter writing, the mundane work, and more into the client contact work, the softer skills, and probably higher cognitive skills. That's where we can see it, because there's a lot of things that the computer can now do for you, and you can just task it, right? So I task it for a file summary, to do research, to draft. If I'm responding to an email, there's sometimes already a draft response done for me. I can change the tone. Here's an example of what the future could be like. And this is already in existence, but we haven't tried it yet. But here is what Filevine is proposing as what's calling a Depot Copilot AI, where at your upcoming discovery, you can have someone prompt you to help you with information that you may have missed.
I didn't even ask about treatment. I totally worded the question wrong on the defendant's negligence. Pretty sure we glossed over incident questions. That really should have gone better.
So this is a great invention, and I expect that in the next couple of years, this will be rolled out and people will be using it. I did try to use it. The court reporting company was not excited because they thought that this was a form of transcription, which you're not allowed to do. So I did try to ask for permission. They wouldn't allow it. Opposing counsel also wasn't comfortable with it. And I sort of treat it like it's like having a junior lawyer sit through a discovery with you and take notes and ask you if you get to sort of chat with them at the end of it and see, did I miss anything? So I think it's coming, and I think people need to get used to it. And it could be very powerful. There's a lot of other things you can do from your desktop. So Zoom allows you to share your schedule and does an AI summary of your meetings. So you can see, for scheduling, I just send a link and people can book their appointments into my schedule. I don't have to delegate that task. Also, meetings with clients and experts. I get a nice little update at the end from Zoom about how the call went. And so again, I don't need someone to sit in on those calls with me if I've got an AI assistant doing it with me. So you can really accomplish quite a lot on your own. And that's the power of these tools. Now, there are challenges with them. And I know the first thing that could be on people's minds is what are all the younger lawyers going to do and the assistants if everyone's doing everything on their own? And the truth is as we get older, we're not really sure how to use these tools, and we're going to need young people to train us how to use the tools. But the truth is the legal field's going to change, and the tasks that are going to be demanded of our clients are going to change. Because we can no longer say it's going to take 2 weeks to do a memo on this and bring a motion on that, because they'll understand, like we do, that there are tools to speed it up. And if your firm is not up to date on using these legal technologies, your client's going to be frustrated with you and wonder why it is that one firm can do it in a couple of days and it takes you 2 weeks. So your other staff are going to do other things, right? There'll be more cases that you can handle. There'll be more detailed work that you can get into, more advocacy that you can do for your client, and less of the administrative work and the drafting that taxes you and holds you back from moving your case forward. Beyond that, there are lots of challenges. So let's think about what happens when you present your case and you want to use AI-powered legal briefs, right, and factums. How do we know what tools you've used and whether the cases are legitimate? There have been 24 known cases in the US where lawyers have relied on AI assisted, chatbots or chat GPT type of generative AI tools, which some of them have been able to get through, and made up case law has polluted our jurisprudence. So that's a problem, and we have to prevent that. There's also the idea that evidence can be led that was faked. How do we know in a custody battle when we have a recording of one of the partners screaming at the other partner, whether that wasn't created through AI? How do you test it? Do litigants have the money to hire engineers to troubleshoot and dig into the data mining to sort out whether the programs were real or not? These are problems, right? Not everybody has millions of dollars at stake that they can afford to have high-priced engineers to solve it, and really good deepfakes may not even be solvable. So these are some of the misused generative AI cases that I've found in the last couple of years, where they've sanctioned the lawyers. So 12 reported cases in the US to date and 1 in Canada where imaginary law was used. And one of them, $2,000 fine to the lawyer. In Canada, we had a BC case where ChatGPT generated case law in a custody battle, very serious case, and she was disciplined over that. We've had a case where it was a client in a defendant was in custody, and he did the research on the internet and gave the cases to the lawyer to submit to court, and the lawyer accepted those cases as being from a legitimate source, and got disciplined for that. We've seen all sorts of sanctions and reprimand, and the judges are definitely on alert to look for that. We've had adverse rulings where the person using the generative AI lost the case. And in Texas, a lawyer was investigated by the Texas Bar. In the Ninth Circuit, that's California, the case was lost because it failed to comply with the rules. Self-reps, which is a huge problem. If you're representing yourself, you think, okay, well, I've got all this internet capability to look up the rules. That happened in the first case, Lee versus Delta Airlines, where there was made up case law about airlines, and it was an injury case on a plane, and it caught the case off guard, and the self-rep lost the case. $10,000 penalty in another case where factums were fictitious. And so the reaction has been, is it necessary to use these tools, right? It's hard to detect them. Do the rules require change? And we've been grappling with how to sort out the change. We don't want to stop progress. The law is always the last to change, but we want to make sure it's done in a safe manner. How do we do that? So here's some of the Canadian courts' reaction. Some have a requirement that you have to, when you submit factums, disclose if you're using AI. Now, AI is such a broad term. Spell check could be AI, Grammarly, all of these things that we use without even thinking. Our phones correct things that without us even looking at them. So, how far does it go? And I think here the idea is that we want to use tools that are helpful to our clients, but don't mislead the court. And so most of the discussion around this topic is how do we keep a human in the loop to explain away what we're doing? What was the data set that was used by this computer? So we know we have some trustworthiness that the cases are going to be accurate, right? And what do we do with experts? How do we prevent, what if the expert comes forward and tells you that the reconstruction that they did using their computer program said the car had 5 seconds to avoid the crash? And nobody can recreate that. No other engineer can take that data set and come up with that same response. That's a problem. How do we validate it? We had this come up in a estates case in the US. The expert used an estate AI tool to calculate using the trusts and all the investments, and they used a certain inflation rate, and they predicted what the evaluations would be over time. And the judge asked the expert witness to explain how Copilot did that work, and he couldn't do it. So the judge said that that report was unreliable. If you can't explain and validate that expert opinion, then that tool becomes, unreliable and can't be used as evidence, and couldn't explain away the case. So that case went the other way. So you have to be careful how it's being used. The 11th Circuit Court, Justice Newsom, has mentioned in many of his decisions that generative AI is something we should be encouraging. It's a high-octane language prediction machine. It's a super thesaurus. It has a great tool capability of advancing a client's objectives. So how do we accept generative AI? Well, if we're going to use the software, we have to be able to identify what it is. So tell the judge, I'm using such and such a software, Copilot. You have to be able to describe what training data, what were the inputs? So in some of the Canadian software, we can say, well, they use Canadian case law. That's the data set. How did you validate it? Well, sometimes it's hard, but you can try. And if it's doing a summary of a document, well, do your own summary and see if it validated. Did it come up with a similar result? Were you confident that it measured up to the way it was supposed to be? And that's the way an expert's going to have to do it if they're going to be able to rely on it in court. Similar with experts, we always have reliability, validity, and objectivity. That's the requirement. It doesn't change with generative AI. So if you're using a generative AI program to give you an opinion and you want it to be accepted as an opinion, you have to follow those same principles. Is it a reliable tool? Can you come up with that same answer every time, or does it always make up a new answer? Is it validated? Can you validate it by doing your own analysis? And is it objective? Similarly, if the expert is using it as a tool, it may have a lesser scrutiny, but can it be reproducible and validated like we saw in that other case? And then we have guidelines on how lawyers should behave, because lawyers are using it to discuss stuff with their clients. This may not even get to the courtroom, but we have to be guided as to how we use this software. So how was it trained? Is it an open source program, or is it a closed source program? Meaning, is it something we found on the internet, or is it controlled data? So let's say I'm putting my client's information in. If I put it on ChatGPT, is everyone going to be able to find it? Am I respecting my client's privacy, my client's right to confidentiality? If not, I could be disciplined over it. I have to make sure I understand the technology and how I'm using it. Am I maintaining that confidentiality? We have another federal piece of legislation that's going through, the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, which will require any software company that has a great range of usage to follow certain protocols in order to, again, follow that. Does it have a human in the loop? Is it validatable? Is it reliable? Other ethical challenges that come up, dealing with confidentiality. Again, the closed versus open system when you demo these softwares. Is it biased? Well, all the software is biased, just as we are. The programmers who create these algorithms have the same bias as we have. So there's a problem with bias. Is it regulatory protected? So I talked about that bill that went through. Can you explain how the model works? Most people can't. How would you ever explain how ChatGPT came up with this poem that it drafted for you? Does it have any privacy violations? Again, all these same principles that we spoke about. You should go through this analysis when you're thinking about using such a tool in your own practice. And Noah Harari warns about reliance on this AI operating system, that it's going to change the direction. It's a new type of nuclear race that we're facing. It's only as good as the input. You put bad data in, it's going to put bad data out. It has an amazing, powerful algorithm that can give you super intelligence, but it has to be done with proper checks and balances. It has to have a self-correcting mechanism. Left unguarded with no guardrails, it will have the ability to manipulate, create higher inequities, and really be quite destructive. Thinking about the future and where AI will be going in the legal profession. There's no doubt we're going to see robots quite soon. In fact, when you go to Europe or if you go to the Far East, they have robots directing you in malls and giving you information, and they seem quite lineal usage right now. But when you see what the power of it is, when you put a generative AI machine inside that it gets its intelligence from, it will be able to do almost anything. Manual labor, it'll be able to do a lot of support with clients instead of nursing. It'll provide 24-hour surveillance. It'll be your personal Merlin, where you can essentially have it with you everywhere, protecting you as well as giving you advice as a companion. All of these things are going to happen in the legal profession. We could see that usage, in terms of client facing. It may even be sitting there putting in inputs and helping. And they just shut down. I have a slide coming up, a robot lawyer in the US that fights your speeding tickets. And part of its algorithm is not to ever use lawyers. So they were able to get it shut down based on the type of algorithm it has, but that's the way it was programmed. We have virtual reality coming up. I mean, we've seen hints of it, but imagine meeting your client in the metaverse. Obviously, the amplification of human intelligence, this whole move towards super intelligence, coming up with decisions very quickly, being able to compute a lot faster than we have been. And that also impact of neural engineering. So somehow having some kind of a piece connected to you, whether it's a wearable or an implant. We've seen stuff with Neuralink. It's obviously decades away, but the idea that we could connect ourselves to the cloud, without having to be looking at a screen or a computer. These are some of the things we just talked about. And as we move forward, this is another image I created through Copilot, so it's not a copyrighted image. Some predictions for 2030. Artificial intelligence will reach human levels by 2029, which we call the singularity. Following that, by 2045, we will have multiplied that intelligence, a human biological machine intelligence of our civilization a billionfold, according to Ray Kurzweil, top engineer at Google. For daily interactions, we will interact with a wide range of AIs in our daily lives as naturally as we interact with others humans today. And I know a lot of us will have trouble with that, but the next generation will not. And when we think of self-driving cars and why things have taken so long to come forward, it's because we can't tolerate mistakes. If a human makes a mistake driving, we understand it because we make mistakes. But if a computer makes a mistake, we don't tolerate it. So one accident happens with a computer-driven car, and we don't want to see computer-driven cars anymore. But our next generation will be okay with a few mistakes because it will be safer. In fact, probably 95% of accidents will be avoided with self-driving cars if it was completed perfectly. And so that's what we can see in the future. Personal assistants, AIs will serve as personal assistants and tutors and career counselors, therapists, accountants, lawyers, even companions. That's by 2030, not so far away. At work, AI will conduct analysis, write code, build products, sell products, support customers, and make strategic decisions. I expect that within the next 5 years, I will probably have some form of a data scientist or engineer as part of our legal practice, helping us improve our systems and make sure that our technology is working as efficiently and as well as it should. The spread of AI through our society will unfold gradually and then suddenly. AI will be able to perform many tasks that humans do today, but cheaper, faster, and more reliably. We will probably move into a 4-day work week. I mean, a lot of people are working that way right now. We will probably see a lot of universal basic income enter our world. And people will find other motivations in terms of hobbies and spending time with family. We will probably move to a social credit system where people will be rewarded for doing good things in society, helping someone with their groceries, that kind of a thing. Raising children will no longer be thought of as a non-work product, but in fact, it will be valued in the social credit system. Lots of interesting things coming up. And there's lots of solutions if you listen to Ray Kurzweil and Noah Harari solve it in terms of the philosophical side of it. So thank you very much for joining this webinar today. I hope you've enjoyed it.